Sorry about that. There's not much more that I want to do on this portrait now that I'm looking at it. Get it centered up here. His hair is kind of a fun one. He's got a lot of gray in there, and I think from the last one that I did of Joaquin Phoenix, when I went too heavy with graphite in the hair, it gets reflective in the light, and I don't really like that. So I might do just a little bit more of a touch-up on this and a little bit more of the fine detail. But compared to the reference photo, I'm pretty happy with it in terms of having like a soft portrait. Also with these that have heavy contrast from one side to the next, I intentionally went lighter than the reference photo because I think if I were to go as dark as it is in the reference photo, it would lose a little bit compared to where it is now. So I'm just going to even things out and add some fine details, and then I'll start the next portrait. I mentioned this yesterday that this is based on a photo that was taken by Brian Bowen Smith. He's a great film and digital Leica photographer. And just before I went live yesterday, he actually reposted a link for yesterday's drawing, which I thought was nice. He's one of my favorite photographers. So if you look through a lot of the photos that I've based these drawings on in this series, they're either typically by Brian Bowen Smith or Greg Williams, both Leica photographers. Yesterday I was a little bit frustrated with the texture of this paper. It's 150 weight. And it's got a little bit grit to it. But, not sure if you can hear that siren. We'll wait. But as I compare this to the reference photo, it actually, sort of a happy accident, emulates a little bit of the visible pores that he has since it's such a high def photo. Hi, Jonathan. I don't have a moderator on my chat, so I'm not sure when you said that, but if you're still here, how's it going? Something that I like to do when I'm drawing more like photo accurate or photo real drawings, even though I mentioned earlier I'm not going to go as contrasted on this side as he is in the reference photo. And it took me a while to learn this, as it's a good example is that in the photo you can see that he's lit from this side. So the reflective surfaces in his eyes are going to be oriented to this side. And you're going to have more contrast over here because he's not evenly lit. Another thing that I notice is his eyes, they're quite a bit darker in the actual photo. And just for the sake of the drawing, I've not gone quite as contrasted on those. But something that it took me a while to get used to doing was like details like this. You can't really see the wrinkling under his eye on this side over here. Whereas in the reference photo, they're actually quite a bit more bold than I've made them here. And it's a personal thing. It's, dependent on your own taste, but rather than making it completely symmetrical where you could see those, I could edit the photo and bring it up so I could do an honest representation of his face, but I'm more interested in replicating my version of the photo in a drawing format. And so for that reason, for things like that, I'm not going to go in and add these. I'm going to just leave it as it is in the photo. Every artist is a little bit different. I mentioned earlier this is based on a Brian Bowen Smith photo. And the other guy I mentioned is Greg Williams. They're two of my favorite photographers. I use a lot of their photos as references. And Brian and I have had a little bit of a dialogue for a while. He was a fan of this drawing when he saw it yesterday. But something I love about both of their style is that it's what I would refer to as a conversational photo style. It's casual, it's not over edited, it's not over lit. It's more about capturing a moment or a mood rather than high detail stuff. Something I love to see is that they both still, even though they started in doing predominantly magazine covers and things like that, they both still do that work, but they're creative, sort of chiaroscuro, high contrast, imperfection, chasing style has kind of come through. So now those magazine covers look more like what they would shoot for gallery shows. I appreciate that a lot, just because as well as drawing, I do photography, and so those guys have sort of led the way for more popular commercial photography to be less of a perfection or a chase in perfection. for anyone who may not have the patience to watch me draw on these for hours at a time. When I finish them, I always time-lapse the drawings so you can see start to finish in about 10 seconds. And for the next drawing that I'm going to start after I finish this one, I'm going to change it up a little bit. I've done 2 drawings this week where somebody has a cigar in their mouth, so I'll do a non-cigar photo for the reference. And usually with these, especially when it's a full-page portrait like this, I typically will have the original for sale. It's a one of one. I mean, you've seen me create them in these videos. And then if people are interested, I will sell prints. But since I'm acquaintances with this photographer that took this, I may offer to just send it to him. Unless somebody wants to jump at getting the original first. Try to open the window, see if it's not too loud. Have our standard city noise, loud neighbors. And as per usual, some of these I'll talk and some I'll just say quietly. But if you don't want to hear me talk, mute it or go away, nicely. I've learned that so far in live streaming, it's a crapshoot whether or not people are art fans or just bored and unkind. I also noticed that typically when I start talking about art and technique, the numbers start to drop. Not that I really care, but I guess aside from the accountability of daily drawing, it's about finding a community or maybe inspiring people to want to learn how to draw. Something that I've noticed that's not exactly directly related to art, but has impacted it really positively. I've been running every day. Again. And the days that I run, I draw a lot better. Have better energy and patience for it. Definitely a lot of positives to it. Get a pretty big endorphin rush and then pretty much draw right after. Which makes a lot of sense to me. When I used to play music for a living, and the days that one of the bands I was in were all relatively healthy compared to most bands. Days that we would work out and then go practice or ride or play a show always seemed to be better days. And it definitely has a positive impact on drawing. I guess for anyone watching now or anyone that finds this in the archive later, let me know if you prefer if I talk through all the art techniques and what exactly I'm doing. I'm sure to some it seems completely random, but there is a method in all of it. I don't know, I think a lot of the time I get bored with talking about art in the same way that anytime I watch a podcast or an interview where they're talking about making films, it just makes me want to go watch movies. I don't necessarily want to hear the talk about the film all the time. Or another good example of that is I'll occasionally go to the gallery events. Like last year, I had a photo that was featured in it was the 10-year anniversary of the San Francisco Gallery. And the worst conversations I had were about photography. I found that a lot of the photographers that were there that were sort of the well-known guys, most of us just talked to, not that I'm well-known, but I talked to them. Most of us just talked about shows that we like, bands that we like, different restaurants. Sort of like the saying of, it's like a dentist going home and looking at photos of teeth. It's a little bit of like a double dip. So unless anyone has a specific question about techniques or methods, I might just ramble. I know that there's a lot of people do like art ASMR, but if I'm being honest, I tried to do that for a few of my videos, and the inconsistency and control over noise that we have in this building is kind of maddening. And so, like I've said in a lot of the other archived videos, it's kind of like ASMR of people doing dishes and having phone calls outside. And whether the window's open or closed, you can hear it. So I feel like the better alternative is to talk a bit. Brolin kind of has like a half-shaven wolfman vibe. He's got a lot of hair. Which I know I said in a video earlier this week that I wouldn't draw another person with a lot of hair. But the next photo that I chose, I guess he didn't have a lot of hair. Definitely has some hair to draw though. I mentioned this earlier, this photo in particular, I mean, he's mostly gray-haired now. He's got a lot of silver in there. So with his hair compared to, say, like the Joaquin Phoenix drawing that I did this week, I'm gonna do more single line hair and kind of imply strands and directional texture. Sometimes for commissions, depending on the type of hair people have, I will be really particular and photo accurate. But once you start shading in hair, you get more of a glare from the lights, especially because I'm using diffused lume cube lights. And I don't have an angled drafting desk, because I've noticed when I use those, my wrist starts to hurt quite a bit. So for the sake of these videos, I'm going to draw flat. So I might go a little lighter in some of the areas in the hair compared to what I would normally do. But, you know, if it were for more of a commission instead of a gift or a drawing for a video, I would do quite a bit more shading and gray hair. But something I like about his hair in this reference photo in particular is that it looks like it's actually been done with his hands. There's big clumps rather than neatly combed hair. which what I would tell people when you're drawing hair, often it's easier to look for the heaviest contrasted spots first and find the shapes around that and then build from that. Like this section in particular, it's not photo accurate right here, but it's almost pure white, and I'm drawing these all in just HB graphite. And I've mentioned this a few times, not as much lately. If you're interested in commissions, you can reach out on my website, or if you just want to suggest people to draw, you can put those in the comments on any of my shorts, or these live videos are all archived. I'm pretty obsessed with film in general, and used to be a career musician, so most of the people that I draw are either related to film or music. I just find it easier to draw people that the general, people that are plugged into media, they'll recognize. It gives a good frame of reference. And occasionally I'll draw the actual character from the movies rather than the actor. I mean, same thing, but sometimes I'll draw them accurate to the movie. I think one of my favorite film character drawings that I've done so far is Cliff Booth. It's Brad Pitt's character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which maybe I'll draw a larger version of that because I've done that in my pocket sketchbook. Curious if anyone else is excited about that new movie. I think it should be interesting. Written by Tarantino and directed by Fincher. I'm sure it'll be different, but if anyone read the novelization of the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there's a lot of story that wasn't in the film that I imagine is going to get expanded in the Cliff Booth movie. So maybe I'll draw an updated version of him, a little heavier with more hair and mustache. I'd say in reference to what I was just talking about with Cliff Booth, if anything, the novelization of the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood makes Cliff a little less likable. So I'll be curious to see if they go in that direction. Actually, I'd say a lot less likable. How can I do wrinkles well? So a trick with wrinkles, it depends on where they're on the light, but let's see if I've got scratch paper. I'll show you a little bit. Make sure there's nothing on this. So wrinkles, typically, it's different when they're in different lighting, but say it's across the forehead. If your lighting source is over here, and it would be darker on this side, like shaded on this side, you can start and do circular patterns around it, and it's basically the absence of where the light hits the wrinkle. And then you just do that to the point where they start to blend. Now granted, this is 150 textured paper that I'm doing the portrait on, and this is really smooth note paper. But then as you get farther from the light source, you want to do a heavier blend, which without the surrounding directional texture from the graphite, it looks really out of place. But imagine that this is already surrounded by a texture of skin. And then as you start to blend it and it flattens out, you can go back and lightly dig in on that wrinkle. And then if you're talking about wrinkles around the eyes, I actually mentioned this earlier if you weren't watching yet. So the wrinkles on this side, he's hard lit from this side of the reference photo. You can see where the reflective light is in his eyes. You actually can't see the wrinkles in the photo over here. I'd have to Photoshop it and bring them up. And so I left it as they are here, just where they're more prevalent on this side. But these, he actually has quite a bit more cross lines in his wrinkles there, like from a lot of squinting, or he's an avid motorcycle rider, so I imagine, unless he's wearing goggles or glasses, he's probably squinting a lot. But those, you just start lightly, and then you can lift the lines with, I use a mono zero eraser. So it's like a little refillable eraser, kind of like a mechanical pencil. And rather than erasing like you traditionally would, like these, I can show you a little bit. There's pores right here that I was starting to do. You just dab at them, and it will bring them out a little bit more even, so the skin texture sort of works with the graphite texture. So a lot of my drawings, I do what's called directional texture. It implies where the fall off of like the light interacting with the face is. And then you can kind of flatten that out. I always do circular patterns on skin because it'll emulate pores a little bit better. But yeah, I've said this a lot in some of the other videos, but I like to do a lot of sort of aged faces. Like some of my favorite drawings were like Willie Nelson, because he's so weathered that it gives you a lot of geography on the face to map out, and the wrinkles are a big part of that. Same as facial hair. Hopefully that answered what you were asking. What color pencils do I use? These are all just graphite. It's just black. These are Blackwing 71s. It's the same as a Blackwing 602. So it's a medium sort of HB graphite. And then color pencils, for those, since I don't draw with them as often, I kind of just get, no, for my shorts. What color pencils do I use for my shorts? I'm not sure which ones you're talking about. If it's in color, it's probably a ballpoint pen. I have multicolor Bic pens that have skin tone and classic black, red, blue, and green. So that's what I use for the color in those. But if I'm drawing with pencil, it's typically just these. Or I have a range of Pentel Graph Gear 1000s. I use these when I travel because the nib completely recedes. So if I throw this in a bag, it won't get bent or broken. So typically if I'm like, I travel quite a bit for what I do, and I don't like to carry these because then I have to carry sharpeners and somewhere to put all that stuff. Yes, I do teach. I mainly just teach private lessons now at different levels. So some of it's geography in terms of understanding like urban scenes or, like scene drawing, if people want to draw like street photography style, like urban sketching. And then I teach a few different ranges of portraits from beginner to intermediate. And that's both in pen and pencil. But yeah, I find that, with teaching early on when I started drawing, I would take classes, and a lot of teachers don't know how to convey information well. And so whether they're a talented artist or talented at drawing kind of didn't factor in because they couldn't convey information at all. And so it was hard to learn. And there's online courses that are like that as well. Like if you look at Domestika is a good resource if you're trying to learn remotely. There's a few classes on there, and one of them is about courtroom drawings, and it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. I had a student who got one of those classes, and he basically just shows how he does it and doesn't explain anything. So unless you're already an accomplished artist or someone who works in many different mediums and has access to a lot of art materials, it's kind of a useless class. So, but yeah, I tend to teach. Honestly, it's mostly adults that want to learn, so beginner and intermediate adult classes. Have I tried color pencil portraits? Yeah, I've done a few. I don't really like a lot of those. I mean, most of the ones that I've done have been animals. I'd show you, but there's one that I did in particular that people seem to like. It was of a turkey's head. And I liked it. It took a long time, but I don't really like a soft color pencil. And I've tried a bunch of different ones. For a long time, I worked at not an art store, but it was like a traveling stationery and pen store. And so I tried a lot of different brands, and I could just never find color pencils that really performed how I prefer to work. So I have done some of those. I think, hang on, I can flip back a few pages here and see. And then once I show you this stuff, we'll go back and finish this drawing, and I'll start a new one. So yeah, like these, if you can see, these are kind of abandoned color pencil drawings. I just got tired of drawing birds. I used to have the turkey that I was talking about was here. So I've done those, but I just lose patience with how soft they are. Yeah, I've tried both Faber-Castell and Prismacolors. I just didn't really like, they're still softer than what I prefer to draw with. Especially because the speed that I draw, I tend to work pretty quickly. Let's see. I draw in several different styles. So as much as I hate to admit this, speed is kind of an important factor for me. So I can, thank you. Because honestly, I'll get bored if I'm working on one thing for too long. It just starts to wear me out. But like this as an example, it's hard to see because my camera's so close. That's done with a Parker Jotter. So that's just a ballpoint pen. It's a $10 ballpoint pen. Or like this ape. It's kind of hard to see because it's under these lights, it's reflective. But that's just with a Parker Jotter and a Bic pen. I do the necks on some of them. Are you talking about for the portraits, like these? These are just isolated, so the whole idea is that it's sort of a floating head. If you look at a lot of my smaller work, and again, it's laziness, but if you look at like here's the Willie Nelson I mentioned earlier, I'll draw the full, portrait or the full bust. Let's see, we've got a few. A lot of the time, like here's the Cliff Booth I mentioned from earlier. So I'll do a full thing like that, but for the sake of this, you know, with like Tom Hardy and Joaquin Phoenix. So if anyone hasn't seen the videos I've been doing this week, this is the first one in this series. And that's just with these two pencils. That's a Blackwing 71, which is the same as a 602, and then Pentel graph gears. I'm just going to do floating heads for these. I feel like it, for the same reason that a lot of the photography and portrait work that I do is really a close focus on getting what's called like a ubiquitous gazer. It's no matter where you move, the eyes are really locked in. And it is a technical trick, but it's something that I find comes with a good portrait, is the ability to capture that. And so a lot of this is just to focus on their face. But yeah, and it just kind of, it depends, you know. Sometimes if I'm drawing, it also depends if it's a commission. You know, if somebody wants a commission, I typically will draw a full portrait of my art progression. Yeah, I've got some. They're probably pretty old at this point. I should do it. I have, so this book that I carry, this is my daily carry. I have stacks of these art books, and you can see the progression of me going from drawing box frame mannequins for animatics, for like essentially for film, for animation and storyboarding movies for people, and for my own projects. I have going from those simple square drawings all the way to urban architecture and drawing in fountain pen and all the different mediums, and then I've kind of just settled back on pencil portraits, and I find that this is what I get, it's what I'm most interested in, so I'm less likely to get bored. And like I said, I travel a lot, so I tend to go back to the easiest medium for me, which is pencil or pen, and I just can take a small, you know, like I have this pen case, which is just like a little flat one, and I'll put fountains or things like that. But yeah, I can do an updated version and show some of the progression. I think you asked me the other day how long I'd been drawing, and I told you seriously for 3 years. What I meant by that was, for 3 years I've drawn at least an hour a day, sometimes up to 8 hours. So it's, you know, consistently. Before that, I've drawn for a really long time, but I just wanted to get more focused on it, because now, especially since I teach, it's I'm also learning different methods to teach students. If I don't know the method, then I'll deep dive it and find a digestible way for them to understand how to emulate that, or, you know, do it themselves. That's cool. It says you're working on a video of drawing 4 different styles using colored pencils, so it takes forever, but it's good. That's good. Yeah, I think it's one of the things that is cool about art in general, is everyone just having such different techniques. Because even the people I've learned this stuff from, I do things differently than them. I find that everyone kind of settles into their own zone, so you also resonates with different people. If anyone's familiar with the guy, his name is Crusadal. He's a Norwegian artist. He does scribble method, and I did his class for a little while just to kind of figure it out, and it really, the one thing I can say I took out of it that I use on a regular basis now that I prefer over other methods is that he measures out certain points on the face and then works from that, and I've kind of embraced that in my method. Because when I very first started doing portraits, I was using a grid. It would take forever, because you'd have to erase the grid as well. Is it true that every single art teacher has at least 5 tattoos? I don't know. I have a lot of tattoos. I mentioned this earlier, but I used to play music for a living, so it was kind of like a part of the uniform. So I don't know how many I have, honestly. But yeah, most, I'd say, like, especially in like more modern generations, most of the art teachers have a few. I think the real question is how many have tattoos that they wish they didn't have. So I don't think that a person exists that has a tattoo that they wish they hadn't gotten. How long did it take to get 500 subs? No, I'm not monetized. I don't even think about all that much. I've had my channel for a really long time. If you go far enough back, you can see that most of my work used to be animation and music videos, um, for my band and other bands. And so I couldn't tell you how long it took because I've had the channel for so long, I think like 16 years or something. Like, I was relatively early on YouTube, and it used to be a landing page for, all the stuff. Like, I was in a band for this one band over 10 or 11 years, and I put out a video once a week for most of those years. So it was every Tuesday I would do a video that was either animated or filmed on location somewhere when we were traveling. And so a lot of those subscribers came from that, and it is funny now because a lot of them, I mean, that band still kind of exists, and so a lot of them will write me and ask if I'm going to do those videos again, and they've been really sweet and kind of embraced that I'm focused more on my art now. And I'd still, every once in a while, I'll do some animation, and if bands have a budget and an idea that I like or are willing to pay for me to make something, then I'll work with them. Um, but yeah, it's hard to answer that because I don't really think much about it, and I'm sure that's probably not what you're wanting to hear, but it's hard to gauge how that stuff works because so much of it is driven by the algorithm. Um, I think also, like, a lot of artists in particular, when they chase the monetization stuff, I feel like they lose a little bit of like their true voice in their videos. So it's probably easier to just focus on like making stuff that you really like, and then people will come. Um, but yeah, I'm sure it would be cool to have that. I do know a few artists. I won't name them because they told me this in confidence, but a couple of them told me that getting monetized was a nightmare, because now these guys are, one of them I'd say is a world-class artist. He does fountain pen and paint, and he said that he gets trolled so much now that even on other social media platforms, he can't really post without people really giving him a hard time. And he's an older gentleman, so I think it can be a bit of a blessing and a curse for some people. I think he was just trying to turn his hobby into something that had a little bit more impact. Um, but yeah, the long answer to that question is I've just had my channel for so long, and it's shifted because there's also like photography videos and some music videos from my bands and other bands on there. So like, we had a song that it's been placed on a few different things, like meaning like shows and movies, and that one video probably gained half of my subscribers, because particularly when the show released, a lot of people kept commenting that they found the song on the show, and so I would get subscribers from that. And then when they realized that I made all the videos for the band, they would stick around and became like the people that would comment like, is the video late today? If we were traveling and I didn't upload it exactly at 12 p.m. But yeah, good luck with that. I mean, it's an elusive thing, I think, for some people. I also see accounts that are monetized that I just wonder who's watching them, or like sort of legacy accounts. I won't name any names, but people that kind of make videos about nothing, and they're really famous on YouTube. One in particular, if anyone's like if they deep dive a lot of YouTube, he posted a video today or a few days ago, and it's him going through all of his art tools, but I've never seen his actual art. I feel like he's just kind of a guy that has a lot of stuff and budget, and it reflects in the videos because there's not much quality to the actual dialogue of the videos. It's just, here's all my tools and gear and lots of sort of heavy-handed editing. And respect, I mean, he's made an empire out of it, so I get it. But I've heard him talk about monetization because I think he was one of the early guys that got monetized. And I don't know that his videos have gotten better. I think it's all like the content chase rather than creating something cool that people just resonate, or that'll resonate with people, you know? But yeah, like I said, other than having those opinions and hearing some stories from folks, it's not really on my mind very much. Like, these videos for me are more about personally having some more accountability and sticking with one style for a long time, and you know, having more of a regimented drawing schedule. Like I said, I draw a lot, and so it's also easier for like my family to plan around when I need everyone to not ask me questions and let me have like drawing time. Let's see, trying to get monetized. Yeah, for like, because I archive all these, I'll explain what you're saying. But it's you're saying that you're halfway to getting monetized, and the videos, so you're halfway there in 7 months, but the videos take about 10 hours. I'd say the other thing is I do a lot of things, but like I said, I animate, so I also have to edit. Your editing workflow and your filming workflow, as you do it more, will get shorter and shorter. So like that's a big thing. If you look back, if you're curious about it, if you look back at like my early animation, those I would stay up all night and make them. And sometimes it would be over 12 hours per edit. And this is back in the day when you'd hit render and then the computer would crash. It's like before they really made computers to handle that. And so sometimes I'd have to remake them. And then by the end of that run of making a weekly video, I was down to about 45 minutes per video. And your workflow will just get faster and faster. But the drawing portion is always going to take, it's all real time, you know, because you can't speed that up or they'll suffer in quality. But I'd say if you enjoy it, just keep doing it, you know. And you know, if you're chasing the numbers, I'm sure they'll come at some point if you just keep doing it. This is, wait a second, animator, teacher, musician, artist. I think you said you read motorcycles. Yeah, so the brief explanation of that, I played music early on, like in high school. I come from a family of musicians, and I had an opportunity to tour with a band in high school, and then that kind of took off a little bit, and then right when I graduated, I linked up with another band, and they already had a booking agent and a manager, and they were kind of established, and so I was young in my grade, and so by the time I was 18, I was touring full time, and every band needed a photographer and someone to film videos. And I had always kind of played with that stuff, and my big brother's a musician, and so I would always make little things for him. And so I had a track record already of doing that. And that just kind of developed over time to be, you know, first it started as like promotional videos, and then we would do like shows where I would film a bunch of stuff and edit it, and then we'd play it on a projector. This is before YouTube existed. I'm a little older. And then that kind of developed into people asking if I would make music videos, and then music videos got harder to film at the like with the scale that people wanted. So then I tried to learn how to do animation and kind of morph those things together. All the while I was making the lion's share of my income from being in touring bands or being a tour manager when I wasn't out with my band. And just kind of always stayed busy, you know, like um, I'm a guy that likes to do a lot of stuff. And so, but not just general things, I like to do a lot of things well. So, you know, when it came to like the animation, that really was born out of my personal band needing more content. This is before we started this the week that Instagram started doing videos. And before that, we were uploading to, you know, Vimeo and, you know, like the platforms that existed before that, Vine, things like that. And the nature of being in touring bands, you have a lot of downtime as well. So if I didn't take tours, I would just have home time where I would be working on productions. And so it kind of just led to animating and playing music with different people. And then I don't think I said I rode motorcycles. I was saying that Josh Brolin does. I did for a time ride them, but it requires too much. I had a 79 Bonneville, a Triumph, and it was a piece of junk. And I think I spent more time pushing it through my neighborhood than I ever rode it because I always had to tinker with it. And I quickly sold that to a friend and just kept doing art. But with art in particular, teaching is the latest thing that I've done in the last several years. Because it started with teaching beginner lessons to people that were looking to do urban sketch. And I already did that because I did that in my drawing books while I was on tour all those years. And people just wanted to learn those things, and then it progressed into people wanting to learn to draw portraits and things like that, and that really fueled me getting to a level where I felt competent teaching people and also with my own art. But yeah, I think it's like I said, I like to stay busy, and so I tend to really deep dive whatever I'm doing and obsess over it. So some of those things I don't do anymore, like music licensing and playing in bands on tour, I don't really do anymore. My last tours were last year, and it was a really intentional decision to not do that anymore. But I still play. I mean, I play at home. I record all my own music, but yeah, I don't know. Creative people, I find that the more of like artists that I'm around, every one of us paints and draws, and you know, because I was taking photos for those bands on the road for all those years, I've always had a half decent camera or, you know, some good setup so I can either take my own good reference photos or you know, like when I travel, I take a lot of photos, whether it's for a reference photo for myself or just to post. Like I have it's funny, on Instagram I have kind of a representation of all those things. I have a music Instagram, I have one just for art and one just for photography, sort of like having a landing ground for all my scatterbrain stuff. But yeah, coincidentally I did ride a motorcycle for a brief time. I think also just the risk to reward on it isn't enough for me, especially now that I have a kid. So I have all my friends from a time, like all the guys that I used to hang with, they all still ride. Let's see. Oh, I think I missed that that dude was leaving. He jumps in a lot though. Dark Gator draws. He does art videos as well. Yeah, like I said earlier, I tend to ramble, so if people ask questions, I will talk. This also gives me time to not get as like, mind-numbingly bored drawing hair. I've mentioned this, I think, in every video I've done this week. When I draw hair, I sort of zone out and lose interest for a little bit. But he's also got pretty silver gray hair, so it's kind of just drawing contrast and shapes. I mean, this one is, the thing about these portraits, you have to pick when you feel like you're done with it, because there's stuff that I could do, but I also don't want to overwork certain areas. And like I said earlier, it's way higher contrast on this side in the photo, and I just don't really want to pull it that dark because I don't really like how those look in graphite. I'm not sure if you're still in here, but are you learning how to draw, or do you draw already? All right. Just one more thing I'm going to adjust on this, and then I'm going to start the next portrait. I've asked people before if they want to guess who I'm drawing, but nobody seems to care about that, so I can just probably tell you as soon as I start it. But I will warn everyone, the beginning of a drawing is probably the most boring part to watch, so fair warning. And then for anyone who doesn't have the patience to watch these, because I think this is my third day drawing this Josh Brolin portrait, when I'm finished with them, I time-lapse the entire process. So you can see 3 or 4 days worth of drawing in about 10 seconds. I realized he's tilting his head just a tiny bit, so I need to bring the hairline down just a touch. Says, sorry, my girl made some shrimp Alfredo, delicious. The learning drawing, girl is drawing, so it would be nice to. Nice, yeah. Yeah, I mean, drawing, I think it's like, I don't mean this in a funny way, but it is a lost art. So many people draw on iPads now, and I think it's also a really personal way of expressing something. You know, like these, I do photoreal stuff, and then I also do really dumb drawings for my kid, and like I'll draw something for friends and just give it to them, you know. But it is, and it's its own language, you know. It's a whole thing. But yeah, especially if you both draw, that's cool. I mean, it's definitely, I think like any art form, if you both take photos, then that's something to do together. It's something to relate on or find things that you're excited to show each other. I come from like a really creative family, so I think that it just sort of was baked in that we all have to draw or paint or play music or both. So it just kind of is a natural thing, and then it's definitely genetic, but it is a skill set that I really do think anyone can learn. It's just a matter of how much time you want to put into it. But I think like anytime people are getting into it, the main thing I suggest is kind of opposite to a lot of advice that I think people give out. Not that anyone's asking for it, but I always tell people to get something that's easy to carry around to draw. For example, I have a few of these, but this is my sketchbook, and this is a Paper Republic one, and it's a leather cover, but it's a band system. So I just put refills in this. So I have like a drawing book, and then I have like sort of like a sketchbook that's more for like new styles if I don't want to necessarily put them in my pencil drawing book, you know. But because it's so easy to carry, I have it on me all the time. It lives in my back pocket unless I'm using it, you know. And I got it from a store that I used to work at in my neighborhood. And it became such a thing where, because I lived and worked in the same neighborhood, people would always tap me on the shoulder if I was going to get coffee or, you know, like out for a drink or something, and they'd ask if they could show like their husband or wife the drawings that I'd shown them when they came into our store. And it became kind of like a little community builder. I'll see people at the grocery store and stuff like that, and I know that we've had in-depth conversations about art. But yeah, I mean, I always like to hear when people are learning to draw or getting into it. I think that was also in terms of like really pushing to get better at certain styles of art. Because urban sketch for me has always been kind of a natural thing since I traveled so much that I was always in places and wanted to draw little memories. But in terms of portraits and things that were universally more appreciated, when I worked at that store and I'd show someone sketches, if I got a poor reaction from them, I feel like I would go home and draw for 8 hours. Like a little bit of I don't know, negative response turned positive. Like, I'll show them how good I'm gonna be, you know. You know, and with those people, half of the time they're probably just busy, you know, or they're in the store looking for something else. But it definitely drove a little bit of my interest in learning different styles. You mentioned shrimp Alfredo. Now I'm hungry. Said, just for the sake of the archive, I tend to read these because I don't save the chat on there. It says, yes, art is lost. I love it despite me not drawing. My girl made a drawing of me on my Honda CBR, and I made it my wallpaper on my computers and such. So I was having that original. Nice. I don't know anything about Hondas. Most of the bikes that I know are vintage, like Nortons and Triumphs. What type of motorcycle? It's like CBRs used to be like the 700s and stuff, right? Yeah, since there's someone talking about motorcycles in the chat. Mainly with Hondas, the only thing I know, my dad used to ride. It's before they had number series. It was a Honda Hurricane. If you've never heard of them, you should Google that. I think most of those models came out in like a chrome metal, sort of metal flake paint. And in the 90s, I think it was like 91, maybe earlier, he bought it in Houston. We're from Texas, and he was riding it back to West Texas to be at work in the morning, and he rode past a state trooper doing like 135. And the bike had come out that week, so nobody had really seen him. It was pre-internet and all that, you know, so you'd have to be like into motorcycles or at the dealership to see that kind of a model. And by the time they caught up to him, because they had radioed ahead to get someone to stop him, the cops were so impressed with his bike that they just wanted him to like show them all the new stuff that they had put on the Hondas, and then they were like, all right, keep it below 100 and then just let them go. Yeah, Honda Hurricane, you should look those up. He said CBR is basically the sports bike for Hondas. They'll share similar body and frames, but different engines. They range from 250cc to I think 1200. Nice, yeah. Yeah, I feel like 250 is a good size. I mean, I've definitely heard the argument of like more power is better if you need it, but it's also easier to mess up with more power. That was, I think, when I was really into it and was obsessed with the Triumph and all that. It was pretty weak. I mean, it also had a whole range of issues, so it was more embarrassing than it was cool. Yeah, I'm always fascinated with them. I was on a trip earlier this year, and we were in this place where a lot of guys ride. Like it's kind of like a place where a bunch of people from all over Europe meet up and ride around this big area. And I just wanted to go back to this one restaurant over and over because you can sit there and watch. I mean, in 1 hour, you probably see 200 bikes go through, whether they're parking to go to a place or just kind of cruising through. So you'd see everything from classic builds to rebuilt stuff and super custom bikes. But it's Europe, so I mean a lot of BMWs, a lot of Moto Guzzi's, few Triumphs. There was a day there where I'd say probably 50 people rode through on Triumphs and Nortons. So it's pretty interesting. It definitely made me want to get a bike. I think I've lost most of the people that were watching talking about bikes. It's all right though. Really don't mind. Let's see, you wrote 100 or 1,000. It was. Oh no, I'm not saying you made people leave. Me talking usually makes people leave. I think people just want me to draw and have ASMR, but I've explained it before. Our building, it's shockingly quiet right now. Our building is so loud, I can't really promote these as ASMR because it's usually neighbors doing dishes and yelling outside. But yeah, I think bikes that are that powerful, it's too easy to mess up because a mistake with that power is felt, I think, a lot more than when you have like a 250 or a 500. Yeah, no, I wasn't saying you made him leave. I'm happy to talk about it. Actually, Brolin rides old panheads and like busted up choppers. I don't think any of his bikes are new. They're all classic Harleys. And the photographer that took the photo that I'm basing this on, his name's Brian Bowen Smith. He is a total like moto head freak. I mean, he's got some of the coolest. If I'm remembering correctly, I think it's like a 1940 something or 1930s Harley. Like his son rides, they do big rides. They're all like buddies with Jason Momoa and ride out of like that area in Southern California. Oh, thanks. I don't think I've ever gotten a comparison to Morgan Freeman, but I like that. Appreciate that. But yeah, if you're curious, look up like if you just go on Brolin's Instagram, you can see the bike that he rides most of the time, and it's like this rusted out, I think it's a panhead. But they all kind of ride, open face helmets. I actually mentioned that the first day I was drawing that. He looks like a guy that rides with an open face helmet in California, like he's squinting all the time. Which is, I think, kind of funny. I feel like when you're looking around at different guys if you couldn't see their bikes or their helmets, you could guess kind of what they ride, like by how they dress and what helmet they have, or you know, how weathered their face is. But yeah, there's a couple. I can't remember if it was a Momoa bike or if it's one that Brian Bowen Smith had. I want to say it's like a 1936. It's a crazy, crazy Harley. It's got big wide T-bars on it. But these dudes, it's a lot of the reason I've kept following them, because I don't typically follow a lot of actors. They do these big group rides, and it is, other than like seeing all those guys in Europe with all the cool bikes, it is one of the things that has made me wish that I still rode. But they're in big groups, you know, and they go out all together all the time. I don't know that anyone really solo rides in that crew, which I think has a lot to do with it. It seems like a really cool community. So you said this would be 18, the only social media I have. Oh yeah, I know a lot of people that don't have Instagram. I think it's a generational thing. Like I mentioned earlier with the band stuff, like my bands have all been so heavily dependent on it that it's like one of the few social media things I don't let go of. But I feel like you get a little bit more of a personal view of some people that use it well. Like Brolin's a good follow because he just posts like movies and motorcycle stuff. To answer your question, if I'd ever ride again, I think about it all the time. Like my family kind of knows whenever there's a cool bike around, they know I'm going to want to look at it. I mean, I'm not going to stop most of the time. I'll just kind of watch them ride, but I don't know. I think about it. It's one of those things that maybe when my kid's older, which I know there's statistics on like guys who ride that are over a certain age being more likely to crash, but I used to ride. I also like, I don't know. I think that a lot of it depends on where you live. Like we live in San Francisco, and I'm sure it would be a blast on a bike. I can't imagine that it would be very safe here, because there's just, even in our neighborhood, I've seen so many guys get smacked by cars because nobody's paying attention in the cars. And there's so many blind hills here that I feel like it would be not as relaxing as like when I used to live in Texas, because then you can go out on like the county roads, and you know, there's like back roads that you can take almost, well, the entire way up to New Mexico, and then you can mountain ride, which is kind of what my dad used to do. But maybe in the future, I mean, I feel like I also have so many things going on. If I start adding motorcycle to that, my wife might be less happy about me adding another thing I'm doing to the long list. But yeah, I keep an eye on a lot of it. Like there's a few bikes that I've always kind of wanted. Like I was always fascinated with cafe racers and bobbers. So there's like a couple companies out there that do some mods that I really like. If I ever did ride again, it would definitely be heavily custom and probably a bobber. But yeah, I don't think I've never been a sport bike guy. Just never really. I don't know. I definitely get it, but for me, it was more about like cruising and not really having a lot of speed necessarily. Yeah, I'm in San Francisco. Yeah, it is kind of shocking. I mean, there's a crew of guys that ride through the whole city, and they're on, I'd say, like the least cool bikes you could have. It's like a lot of mini bikes and like sort of modded out like off-roads that have slicks on them. And they ride around in a big pack, and they run all the lights and stop signs, and so it causes all kinds of chaos here. I see that stuff, and I get like they ride more on the flat areas. Like there's one long stretch called Union that once you get over the hill, it's just like a straight drive all the way to Presidio, and it links up with like the 101, so you can cruise over the bridge. But yeah, I think if it was like a mode of transportation, it's not really the ideal thing in San Francisco. But yeah, I was in Austin when I rode, which even then, like, it's I have a cousin who is an avid, he rides a BMW, like a tour bike, and he said that he wouldn't typically ride in Austin because it's too drunk of a city. But also there's like, you know, because my dad rode, I've heard tons of stories of good and bad places to ride. I also grew up around, one of his friends was a professional racer. If you want to look him up, his name is Britt Turkington. Um, and he always used to say if cars and bikes were meant to be together, they'd race them on the same track. And so he never rode street bikes, but was like I think he rode for Honda for a long time. Um, so I kind of get it. I think it's just like whether people are risk averse or not, and having to factor in that basically no one's paying attention, even if you're a great rider, you know. But it really depends on where you live and the type of bike, whether people can hear it well or not. But I'm also a fairly large guy, so I think I'm pretty easy to spot on a bike. So here's what you were asking about earlier, with texture and wrinkles. A lot of it is just playing with how they would interact with the light. There's always an absence of light right in it. And then you have to be careful because this is such a fine lead on this one that it can kind of gouge the page. But typically if there's a deeper crease in the skin, you want to put like a soft circular pattern for the initial wrinkle and then go through the middle of it with a finer point. So that's the deepest one on that side. Yeah, in regards to what you were saying earlier about people leaving, because I was saying that I think I ran everyone off. That's kind of how it goes with these things, is half of the time I'd rather not even talk about art because it's kind of like double dipping. Like I said this earlier, but it's like a dentist going home and looking at photos of teeth. Like I almost enjoy it more when I don't talk about art unless people have a specific question, which I never mind answering. But it's really rare that people actually talk in the chat, so it definitely helps the drawings go by a little bit faster. You said bikes are a bit better than people think, like 100+ miles. Oh, miles per gallon. I was like, miles per hour. Yeah, I think like every rider is different. That's the main thing, is like I know guys who like I can think of one guy in particular. I won't name him because we're still buds, but I think he got a bike because it was cool, and I'm not sure that he ever learned how to properly have one. I watched him take off one time in his front yard, and his handlebars were still locked because he had a great looking Harley, but it was sort of like an absent-minded rider, and so that made me nervous for his safety. But he definitely wasn't going fast. I mean, he was always kind of cruising, you know. And then he got rid of that bike. He told me it was for financial reasons, but I think it's because he had too many close calls. But yeah, if I ever got back into him, I think it would be more about how custom I could make it. And there's a company I keep trying to remember the name of it. Maybe it's Thornton. It's these custom bobbers that always pop up in ads on Instagram, and then every time I see him, I go down the rabbit hole of looking at all the different custom builds that he makes. So I'm fascinated with those because they look more like a World War II era Harley almost. Obviously with better tech, and it's all LED lights, but they're more like even idling, they're incredibly loud. So it's one of those things where I feel like people would have to be like completely oblivious to not be aware of you on the bike. Yeah, took off in front of all of like a big crowd of people that were leaving his house to go somewhere. His handlebars were still locked, and we were all wondering what was happening, and then he just dropped his bike in his front yard. We all had to go help him pick it up. I think it was an 883, but he had it modded out, so like everything was custom on it. All right, I think I'm gonna call that done on this portrait. Yeah, he was definitely embarrassed when he dropped the bike. I was one of the first guys to get over to help him pick it up because I knew, for one, he had to look at all of us to pick it up. So yeah, I felt really bad for him. It was pretty embarrassing. And then, scuffed up the bike, of course, because it fell in his uneven yard, so there was like some dings on the tank. All right. Let's see what time's it. So that's an hour and a half of drawing. It's not too bad. So for these, I don't know if people can ever see this, so I always just move it, which makes it editing the time lapse suck. But just so if anyone ever does buy these, you can see it's the actual piece that I'm selling you. So you said you dropped yours in front of your girl while you're walking with it. She never let that down. Oh yeah. Yeah, those moments I think really change people. My kid skateboards, and I haven't stepped on a skateboard in 30 years, and I ordered one. Not that it's the same as a motorcycle, but falling and dropping things. I got a cool board to go and skate with her, and then 5 minutes after I got on it, I fell so hard in front of her and my wife that I've only been on it like 3 times since then. It was one of like the most humiliating moments of my life. So, that's I think it's like a rite of passage with any sort of thing like that. Cool. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and start the next portrait. I gotta move a few things around here so I can get my reference photo pulled up. I'm wondering the other 8 people that are watching, if they also like motorcycles or if they're muting it so they're not hearing us talk about this stuff. All right, so previous to this, I've been asking if people want to guess who I'm drawing, but no one has had the patience for that, which is fine and totally understandable. I'm just going to tell you this time. And also because it's kind of a non-standard photo of him. It's a photo taken by Greg Williams, the photographer that I've mentioned a few times. He's a great black and white photographer. He shoots with a Leica Q series, so used to be, I think he's used all the Q series. But he does a lot of documentation on film sets, and so this is from when they were filming Minamata, which is the film about a photographer going to Japan and being in like a rural area where they were polluting water, and he basically made friends with the whole community and gave cameras away and stuff like that. So it's a photo of Johnny Depp, who played him, looking kind of like him at the time. All right, let me just sharpen a few things. And for anyone that's either watching this live or finds them later in the archive, I've had kind of a love-hate relationship with this Blackwing sharpener this whole time. So this portrait that I'm about to start is the 10th one, or I'm sorry, the 4th one. I was half reading comments there. It's the 4th one in this series, and I've been using Blackwing pencils and sharpeners for most of it, which, if anyone's curious, I think I've used them enough to really give like an honest review on quality. But these things, it's a 2-step sharpener, so you can cut the wood away as well as sharpening the graphite, and they go through pencils really quickly, which is kind of disappointing, because although it gives you a really nice edge, it's relatively short-lived for this style of drawing, and then these pencils are astronomically expensive compared to any other pencil, so it kind of makes me wonder if it's worth it, especially when it's basically an HB lead. Speaking of that, I'm gonna grab a new one. I see your comment there. I'll get to it here in a sec. So I've got, this is the Frank Lloyd Wright series of these pencils, and they're the same as the Blackwing 602s. So that's all the different colors, the different erasers, and they're, so far I like them. I don't know that these were all gifted to me, so I like them even more because of that. I don't know that I'd ever get them again, because they don't hold an edge very well. But then when I tried, there's 2 harder series that I've also got. So there's the full black one. This is a different series. This one is so hard that on any heavy grain paper, it makes it really difficult to get consistent shading and depth, and so I tend to not use that as much unless it's for some other style of drawing. The other ones are the Blackwing Naturals. They look great in theory, but they are the hardest. I think the Natural's the hardest one that they make, and it's awful for portraiture. They're too hard. So if you're doing an urban sketch, I would recommend these 2. But then if you want to add depth and not have a lot of grain to it, I think you have to get a 602, which is the normal 602s are gray. It's a graphite color that's like reflective. And I like those. I really like Frank Lloyd Wright. If anyone's not familiar with him, he's a famous architect and has a lot of cool history. So I liked the idea of it. But I don't think I'd ever buy, I don't know, maybe I will. I don't think I would buy these again though. It's something where I've enjoyed drawing with them to an extent, but I am getting to the point where I'm wondering how much money do I really want to spend on pencils, you know? Especially when a mechanical pencil travels better. Let's see. I'll pull this one for a new one. Let's see, you said you treat embarrassing things such as dropping a bike or stepping on gum as kind of a proud moment on the moment rather than leave it. I kind of like it. No, I don't mind. You don't take it over the stream. That's kind of the point. A lot of this for me is, I've said it a bunch of times, so it's redundant a little bit, but I like the community of it as well as drawing. When I draw a lot in public here. And so a lot of the time when I'm drawing, I'll talk to people. Like there's a couple cafes here in town, and I'll go and sit and draw. So it's kind of the community part of it that I like, as well as the accountability of daily drawing. Before I start, I'm going to sharpen this new one. You can kind of see what I mean. It's a dual sharpener. So this side will shave away all the wood. Sorry if this is like nails on a chalkboard to people. Yeah, in response to that, I think that's the way to be. You gotta like let those things happen. My kid had like an embarrassing moment a while ago. I can't even remember what it was because, you know. But she asked me about embarrassing moments, and the main story I think of when I think of like embarrassing things, I was on stage one time. We were opening for a band as like a warm-up act, so they were a somewhat well-known band in their genre. And whoever they tour with on the last song of their set every night, to make their crowd really get into the band, they have them come up and play a song with them. And it's usually a cover song. And they kept telling me to get up and play drums. And I was too nervous to do it, even though I knew the song, and it was an easy song. And the last night of the tour, they told me I didn't have a choice. I had to get on stage. And so I got up and I played through it, and their drummer stood next to me and talked me through changes as we were playing. And it went over, it was great. Crowd responded well, and then they said my name and told me to take a bow, and when I went to take a bow, I fell off the back of the stage. Which to everyone else I think probably looked like a magic trick, but to me it just meant that I shaved the fronts of my legs on the edge of the stage and then almost busted my chin on it. So it felt embarrassing, but in retrospect it's kind of funny. But yeah, I'd rather just own those moments, and I've told that story to a few people. Okay, back to drawing a little bit. So what I'm doing now is marking out this is a representation of the approximate bottom of his nose. His eye line's above the camera, so it's a little bit looking up at him, but it's so subtle that can really mess with the perspective of drawing, especially when they're looking right at the camera. So this is kind of an imprecise method. And then I'm measuring he's at a slight angle, so his eyes are going to be like this angle rather than level. I'm measuring from the corner of his left eye to kind of get an approximate line there. And then I also do where the hairline starts. And it kind of depends on the perspective of the photo. He's got a little bit of like a frown here. So I'll probably measure from the corner of his mouth rather than the center of his lips. And that's as rough as they start. And all of these portraits that I'm doing, they start out literally exactly like what you just saw, and then they end up more detailed by the end of it. So these all started the same way. And the one difference is that occasionally, again, I talked about this earlier, but it's the speed in which I want to draw, how quick I want to get through it. And really, when you're drawing anything, it's better to draw it rough and then refine it, which is why I prefer pencil. Even though I do draw a lot in ballpoint ink, I would rather fix a halfway decent or a bad drawing instead of aim for perfection the first time. It'll allow you to draw more. And then the other thing I use on all of these is this 6-inch automotive ruler. So it's a little flat ruler that I can carry in my smaller notebooks. But that way you can measure the width of the nose from the base of the nose to where the eye line starts. If you're trying to draw photoreal portraits, it helps to have a little bit of a gauge, even if it's not exactly to scale with the reference. Because sometimes I'll start with that, and then I'll kind of expand it if I want to draw it a little larger on the page. Eventually I'll do these in horizontal so people can see the reference as well, but right now I'm drawing off of an iPad instead of a print. I would rather draw off of a print, so it's something I can actually mark up and draw on, but iPad is what I have for now, so. Okay. Just make sure, because I readjusted this. And then just for a little bit while I'm doing this first initial part, I won't be monitoring the chat, but feel free to comment. And I never mind when people are talking about anything in there, so long as it's nice. I've had the occasional trolls this week, which is not as fun. So it's nice to actually have some community going on in the chat. This is also a tricky one because it's a naturally lit photo. And so some of his features that would normally be a little bit more bold are actually really soft. But I chose it intentionally to get a little bit more practice on this. I've actually drawn it smaller this week already. And then with these, something I always like to point out is that nobody's face is symmetrical. And he's at just the slightest angle. So it is a little bit hard because I think the tendency is to want to draw a symmetrical nose and nostrils, make the eyes perfectly even. Let's see, it says chat trolls and what they do. The trolls, I think, were just at random. Like, I talked at length about it. I know you're not supposed to, like the recommended thing is to not talk to trolls. But I feel like, maybe it's just my generation. I don't know. It doesn't faze me in a way where I'm like, oh no, I won't draw anymore. It's more so a knee-jerk reaction of wanting to say something back, you know? Most of them were just saying this is taking too long, give up, just quit, blah, blah, blah. They said, like, the reason I noticed them in the first place, because I think, in the beginning phase of a drawing, they got flagged for saying a bunch of vulgar stuff, and so I saw, like, a different notification pop up in normal. Because sometimes on these, I don't talk at all, I'll just draw, like, depending on the day. Like, I feel pretty awake right now, so sometimes if I'm tired and I'm drawing, I'll just kind of zone out. But yeah, it was, I don't know, I think it's probably a sign that I was getting traction, because that video did have, it was it had decent numbers compared to some of the other ones. So I think it's just people randomly, like, drive-by troll type stuff. But I think, like, the difference is sort of what I was talking about with you earlier, is that my career previous to any of the stuff I do now was playing live, and that started in an era where people would throw bottles on stage, like, not like at a modern like country concert, but like in, like, bars where they had to have security because it was a normal thing, you know. So I don't know, made out of tougher stuff than people that would get upset by that. If anything, it just annoys me because I want people to feel comfortable to ask, like, questions about technical aspects, or, you know, really anything. Like, we've been talking about motorcycles and stuff for a lot of this, and I feel like the trolling stuff kind of gets in the way of that. yeah, I think also with the trolling stuff, it's something that is more of an announcement of like ignorance and loneliness than it is. Like I know some people think it's bullying, but it really, regardless of whether you're running the live stream or just watching someone in it, I feel like it's kind of announcing that they don't have anything better going on, and especially if they're critiquing the art. That was another thing, is people saying, it was, I was trying not to laugh at it because it sometimes people will just ask questions that there might be a language barrier, so I never know if it's somebody trolling. Sometimes early it just kind of starts out like an oddly worded question, and like, no judgment. I'm not multilingual, so I get that that can be difficult. But you know, somebody, I hadn't announced who I was drawing yet, and they kept saying the nose was too big, the cigar looked wrong, and I was like, no one knows who I'm drawing yet. So, you know, how would you know if his nose is too big? And it may have been like, let's see. Oh, right on. I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I mean, stuff like that. Like, I've had a few people drop in and offer like critiques and stuff, but knowing how much time I put into these and what the final result looks like, and you know, some of the other artists that I've learned from, seeing how their sketches start, anyone, I wouldn't even use the term experience, anyone who's put in the time and is disciplined and has even just a cursory knowledge of certain types of drawing like this, like photoreal drawing, wouldn't offer criticism or critique halfway through. It's just kind of like a, I mean, I've never thought I'm going to go online and critique someone's art. I typically only talk about it if people are curious about it. And half of the time when I've been doing these live streams, my intention is to eventually put the playlists in the description of these. So if people want to listen on their end to what I'm listening to, like I have an AirPod in, so I have a playlist that's been playing this whole time. So if nobody's chatting or anything, I'll just listen to that. And until then, like when I start putting playlists in the description, I've just been announcing what I'm listening to and why I like it, you know, which has started a few conversations. Like there was a guy who pops up in some of these, the student Nolan, who's from Pennsylvania, and he started asking me about music, and I told him actually one of my favorite bands is from Philly. And then we had a whole conversation about Dr. Dog, which is like a good band if people haven't looked him up. You know, it's one of my favorites. So not even art related, it's just kind of like what I would talk about if I was drawing at a cafe with people. So like here's a good example, is that this is a little too far out. I'm actually going to scale up my photo just a touch because I don't want to draw it that small. Yeah, I listen to a lot of instrumentals. There was a band that I've been friends with and worked with over the years, and they were strictly instrumental. And that kind of opened up a lot of stuff that I listened to. I also used to listen to like Mogwai and Kronos Quartet a lot. So it allows for, I think, a lot more brain activity to happen rather than listening to lyrics. I listen to film scores a lot. There's a few that I really like, or just, you know, specific guys. Like Alexander Desplat. Like, he has a couple. Tree of Life is a really great instrumental score. Of course, there's always Mark Mothersbaugh. He's all over the place. I mean, he's scored everything from like Pee Wee Herman to Wes Anderson films. Oh, you're all good. Half of the time I'm skimming through these chats, just making sure I'm reading it right. So like I was saying, this is always the, I think for me and the viewer, the most boring part, starting the drawing. But this is literally what it takes to make the photoreal end result. Oops. Oh yeah, I mentioned it earlier. If y'all want to guess, you can. But I don't know if you want me to just tell you or not. Because before I'd have people guess and nobody guessed. So I just kind of gave up on the concept. So let me know if you want me to just tell you outright. It's I think I was saying earlier, it's kind of a non-standard photo of him because it's when he was filming a movie that was less costume oriented. And this photo in particular, it's shot by Greg Williams. He does a lot of like on-set photography. If you've ever seen like any of the Daniel Craig Bond films, any on-set photography for the most part was done by the same photographer. He also covers like the Grammys and Oscars and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. I mean, typically he's in a lot of makeup or costumes, which I feel like is almost too much of a hint. But this one, he just kind of looks rough and old. And then this photo in particular is just funny because he's actually in a barrel. So it's a great photo of him, but it is kind of funny. If, like right now, it's just zoomed in on his face. If you look at it as the whole photo, it's him soaking wet in a barrel. And then he's done everything from like incredibly serious roles where you kind of don't think of him as the guy, as the actor anymore, to like kids' films. And he got into some legal trouble in past years, but was absolved, so I'm not drawing like a scumbag or anything. Which, oddly enough, some of that legal trouble he was in, some mutual friends of ours went to high school with the person he was in legal issues with, which their stories made it a lot more, put a lot more context to it for us when we were all watching it. So typically I go to the eyes. I'm gonna work in this a little bit because it's I'm going to build a little bit more down here just to kind of give a little bit more shape. Yeah, that's him. First guess. Yeah, I don't know if everyone was on this, but when we first moved out here, I feel like there was a whole week of our lives where we just watched the Johnny Depp trial. I don't know, I feel like he's gone through a bunch of funny stuff recently. I'm always baffled by that type of stuff. Um, there's been like a bunch of, in the last few years, people acting shocked that a drunk is a drunk. You know, it's like pretty public about it. I mean, he was best friends with Hunter S. Thompson, and he wasn't exactly a beacon of great behavior, you know. Which that's actually another good. I was recommending some movie stuff earlier when I was drawing Josh Brolin. If you haven't seen the Gonzo documentary, that's a great documentary. He reads a lot of the stuff that Hunter S. Thompson wrote in that. And speaking of motorcycles, there's a great thing. I can't remember what, if it's in one of his books or if it's just some of his random writing, but Hunter S. Thompson has this great thing. I think it's one of the opening pieces in that movie talking about going down the 101, I think with his headlight off on his motorcycle, like going really fast. It's kind of classic Hunter S. Thompson. He, I don't know if you're a reader. I'm mainly talking to, I don't know what your name is to see your screen name, but we've been talking about motorcycles for anyone that's listening now. He also wrote a great book about the Hells Angels, where he went and kind of lived with them and then was sort of booted from the crowd. Early, not early, but I guess like early for what people know Hunter S. Thompson for. There's also a great TV clip, it's on YouTube. One of the guys from the Hells Angels rides his bike onto the set of a talk show. It's like in the round, so the whole crowd is sitting. No, it's not on the set of Pirates. It's that is a good guess though. It'd make a lot more sense. I think it's from Minamata, the film about him going to Japan. I forget the name of the photographer, but he went to Japan to kind of document what this pollution was doing to a local community, and then he got like really tied in with the community. And oddly enough, I'm pretty sure that that pollution had to do with like Kodak and different film companies, so it was like someone that he had relied on for his career. Yeah, same here. We're both avid readers at our house, or all three, I should say. Yeah, I went through a really heavy Hunter S. Thompson phase. I feel like most dudes do. It's a thing that like, it's sort of like when you ask a guy like movies they like, typically they'll say Fight Club, which no knock, it's a great movie. It's another Fincher film. I was talking about Fincher earlier. But yeah, I'm a big supporter of the library as well. I think that is another institution people should get into more. But yeah, if you haven't read Hunter S. Thompson, I mean, everyone reads Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas because they know the movie, but he's got a lot of great books. There's also like the stuff he wrote for magazines, like Fear and Loathing at the Kentucky Derby, and the artist that he traditionally worked with is Ralph Steadman, and he's one of my favorite artists. Steadman does like splatter paint, where he'll drop a bunch of oil paint on a canvas and then he'll find birds and different things in it. And Actually related to the last portrait I did of Josh Brolin. He was trying to get a graduation gift for his son, oddly enough, who has the same name as me. And his son is a huge Ralph Steadman fan, and he asked him if he could commission a painting, and Ralph Steadman answered the phone knowing it was an actor, and then said, and I'll say it in a nicer version in case there's younger listeners, he said, "Why would I do that?" and hung up. He didn't care that it was Josh Brolin, because, you know, he's spent his life around tons of famous people and was kind of attached to Hunter S. Thompson for most of his career. He's still around. He's a British guy. He's probably getting up there in years. I'd want to say he's probably closer to 80 or more. Still a great artist. So I scaled the photo up that I'm using as a reference, so I'm going to approximate this eye, and then I might go and adjust where it lands. Eyes are pretty much my favorite part in all the portraits I do. But I will say I think because I like this part of it so much, it's often what I spend the most time on to get the detail and just the general shape right, especially with somebody who has a heavier upper eyelid like him. Let's see, don't watch films or TV shows unless it's cartoons. I'm not sure why, but I think it's the range of potential funny images from like transition frames or something. I don't know. Yeah, it's funny. I can't watch cartoons really anymore. I think from years of doing animation, I just see work when I look at it. My brother always recommends all kinds of animated stuff, and I just can't. I don't know. Also, years ago, I dated a girl that was obsessed with, it wasn't Howl's Moving Castle, but it's another one of those. And she used to put it on all the time, and it really made me hate it. It's beautiful. I wish I loved it. But I think when I watch it, I just feel frustrated. But I get it. I mean, there's stuff that I think is tough to get into. I pretty much watch, I mean, at least once or twice a day, I'll watch a full movie. If I'm not live streaming while I'm drawing, I typically have a movie on. And then for TV, I only watch like more cinematic stuff. Like I pay attention a lot to the cinematography and different elements of it. So I can't really do like reality TV or anything like that. It probably also plays into why I don't watch a lot of animated stuff, because it's the cinematography is still, it is still there. There's still cinematography, but it's not traditional. Where'd they put the camera, where are the lights, that kind of stuff. But in terms of like cinematography in general, a lot of films that I watch, it's kind of based on who actually filmed it. Like Robert Yeoman is one of my favorites, which I think a lot of people don't appreciate him as much as they should, because he's worked with a ton of people, but he's most known for Wes Anderson films, and I think people write those off because they're kitschy and so specific. But he's a really brilliant cinematographer, and a lot of those films look like they do because of him. You said you mainly like slapstick cartoons, like Tom and Jerry, SpongeBob, Courage the Cowardly Dog. Yeah, I think it's probably also a generational thing, because I'm a little bit older, so like most of that stuff I associate with my younger sisters. So I've definitely seen all of that. You know, I used to watch Tom and Jerry and stuff like that. But yeah, I also just like, I mentioned earlier that I listen to like interviews and watch podcasts about filmmaking, and it typically just makes me want to watch the movie, but there's always great stories in there. The guy that I was talking about a second ago, Robert Yeoman, He's filmed every Wes Anderson film, and including Bottle Rocket, which was his first feature. And when the production company told them, when they wrote out the budget for the film, they had to budget in multiple lenses, but Wes Anderson and Robert Yeoman were basically going to shoot the entire thing on a 24 mil lens, which it's common for like a certain type of storytelling where you're looking at more of a tableau or a scene. The Coen brothers do that a lot of the time as well. Like all of No Country for Old Men is on a 24 mil lens. And the production company said they wouldn't fund it unless they budgeted that in and used multiple lenses. And so Robert Yeoman wrote up this whole pitch for what lenses they were going to use. And then they just lied to the film company, got the funding, and then filmed the entire thing on a 24 anyway. And then when they showed the dailies, like the stuff that they were shooting on a daily basis, no one could tell the difference. They just knew that in other film proposals that they always had, like 5 or 10 lenses in them. I like that he had done so much established work and still didn't really, like, he's kind of a bit of a filmmaking pirate. He also filmed the Wrecking Crew documentary, and they did that all by hand, so it's like a completely different cinematography. I mean, it's all super loose and from the hip. He basically has no pupils in this, so I'm just gonna approximate for his lifestyle and what looks appropriate for now. What exactly do different lens sizes do? So there's a lot of different things. Like I said earlier, I did a lot of videos, like music videos and photography. I still do photography. I wouldn't even say I retired from music videos. I just stopped saying yes. I typically use a 24 mil, and what that captures is a wide scene. And as you get closer to your subject, it distorts their face a little bit. It kind of widens everything. And there's so much about, like, I could write a book about all the stuff I know about them, and there'd still be an encyclopedia worth of the things I don't know. But so a good example would be if you see like a tight dialogue scene in a film or a show where it's soft around them, where the focus is like really centered on them. That's called the bokeh, and it's soft towards the edges because they're shooting at a like a lower aperture to let more light in the lens. And so, for example, like I mentioned, Robert Yeoman mainly using a 24 mil, or always using a 24 mil on Wes Anderson. They do close-ups, but the close-ups are still a few feet off of the subject. And usually they do like whip pans where they'll turn the camera physically in the scene. And with a 24 mil lens, you're able to capture the entire scene regardless of the movement of the camera. Whereas like if you were on a 50 mil, it would be more of like a dialogue thing where it's a close-up of someone's face as if you're standing right in front of them. And then aperture on lenses is a whole different thing. Aperture is how much light you're letting in, and the lower the aperture, the softer the sides are of the shot. So there's a range of different uses for each lens and how you use it. And then there's also like anamorphic lenses, which have more of a square look to them rather than like a rounded thing. It's almost like a letterbox. But then there's some people that will use 10 different lenses, and they'll use like a 200 millimeter lens for a close-up, and you can kind of do like forced perspectives where you make things look much larger than they are. Like there's I can't remember the lens itself. I know it was custom made, but in that movie Pacific Rim, I wasn't a big fan of the movie, but I just remember that I think Guillermo del Toro did it, and there's a scene where one of the actors loses his glasses, And it's in a big white area, and he's basically wandering around looking for his glasses, and it's an ultra wide lens sitting in front of a embellished, oversized pair of glasses. And the idea was that he's wandering around in the back of the frame out of focus, and you're looking through his glasses, which in reality, to make it look like that, they're giant, and he's wandering around, 10 feet or more away. You said so it changes the focus distance and aspect ratios. Kind of, yeah. Like a 24 mil would be traditionally used more to capture a scene and would be in focus most of the time when they use them, in focus everywhere. Whereas like if you're using a 35 mil or a 50 mil, that's also kind of like if you ever look at classic photos, like people who are documenting, for like a magazine or an editorial, they're shooting on film. A lot of the time they're going to be using a 35 mil or a 50 because it's a 35 mil you could still capture a scene with, but you could also use it as a portrait lens. 50 mil is traditionally more of a portrait or even like a bust. And then they all have different apertures. Typically the cheaper the lens, the higher the aperture. The lower the aperture, the softer the sides are and the more light it lets in. So like, yeah, it affects the depth of the shot. It affects, the aperture affects the light and the softness of the shot. Also, there's like a whole art form of pulling focus, which is, when a camera is moving, someone's pulling focus to keep it in focus. So there's a lot of things that I watch in films where that's literally what the art form of the cinematography is, the fact that they're able to keep something in focus like that in like high moving shots, and that's a lot of the time they do it remotely now, which they used to do it on a camera cart where there would be somebody sitting there dialing the focus according to distance, which they still do sometimes, but it's a lot more rare. But like I've filmed things in the past where essentially we would measure out the distance of the lens from what we were focusing on, and then put the camera at that distance in a closed closet, and then open the closet so it would flood the frame with light. And then you're able to start in total blackness, open it, get the shot, and then close it and go back into blackness, and it's in focus without having to pull focus in the actual capturing moment. So there's all kinds of tricks that you can do with stuff, and that's sort of like, that's a lot of why I don't watch animation and cartoons. There's just a whole element of it that my brain's already looking at. I'm wondering all the time how they got certain scenes, and like there's kind of a whole art form unto itself of capturing things in a car. It's a pet peeve of mine anytime I see that they took the headrest off in a car, because it's like universally accepted now that there's no headrest in cars in a lot of movies. And that's mainly so everyone's face can be seen without having to sit in the middle of the back seat. So I always kind of salute people when they don't remove the headrest and make it look more like real life. I'm honestly, I'm shocked that it's not just me and you in here. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just I'm rambling about cinematography and lenses. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like another good example of a single lens film is No Country for Old Men. Brolin, who I just drew, that's another film that I believe was captured entirely on a 24 mil lens, and you don't really see as many close-ups in that. You see more of a scene, and it makes you feel stressed, like you're there with them. Like there's a lot of really tense moments in that film, and being in the entire scene the whole time and having a lot of like a lack of movement in the camera, it makes it feel like you're in the suspenseful situation with the character. Yeah, like that's a good point, is like turning a headrest into a camera, hiding the camera in there. There's all kinds of tricks that I really like when I see people do that. Or like a floating camera trick where they hand the camera off to an op that's in the car. Like I've seen them do that where the op is actually dressed like the seat. And so they walk right up to the car with the camera and you don't notice that it's actually a camera op with a headrest on as a helmet. I'm trying to think what movie that was. There's a great chase scene where they hand the camera off 4 or 5 times. A good example of like what I think is unnecessary camera movement, and it kind of ruins scenes for me. In the first Joaquin Phoenix Joker film, I didn't mind the film. It didn't like rock my world like it seemed everyone else did. You know, I really didn't get the appeal, even though I really like him and was interested in the idea. There's unnecessary camera movement, and so there's a part when he gets inside of his own refrigerator, which is already weird enough as it is, and the camera's progressively moving closer to him on a smooth dolly. So it's somebody having an unhinged moment, and the capture of it is perfectly smooth, like it's on a motorized track. And I feel like the cinematography right there fails because it's not a good representation of the mood that they're supposed to be setting, and I feel like they just did it because they felt like it was too boring in the capture of the moment. And so there's things like that that I notice where I would never watch that movie again for 10 different reasons, but stuff like that, I don't really get it. And then there's things like same concept but used, I think, in a more appropriate way. There's a film called of course, I'm going to blank while I'm talking about it. It's a Michael Fassbender film. Steve McQueen was the director, Irish Steve McQueen. Hunger is the name of the movie. And I watched a screening of it in Austin years ago, where I think the film, like someone who worked on the film was there. It was for South by Southwest. And everyone in the theater leaned forward when it was happening, and there's a guy just mopping water down a long hallway in a prison area, like it's a long hallway of cells, and everyone leaned forward when it happened. And I think that's like it happened because of the camera movement slowly pushing in on this mundane thing. And then I don't know if it's right next to that scene, but then there's another scene of a guy just having a cigarette outside in the snow after there's been like this really awful moment, and the camera is completely locked off and still, and it tells a story with no dialogue. And so I feel like that kind of stuff is what I'm really attracted to with cinematography and film. It's how I watch a lot of stuff. It's kind of a blessing and a curse, because sometimes I'll watch things and I'll feel like I need to rewatch it immediately to catch the actual story, because I've been looking at where the camera and the lights are. Anyway, it's a long rambling session. I probably won't get super far into this drawing tonight because I've spent a little bit more time on the previous one than I thought. But I live stream every day at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So for at least the next 2 weeks, I will be doing that. The time will change after those 2 weeks, and then I'll see if I'm going to come back on at that same time. But every day, Pacific Standard Time, 5 p.m., so California time. So far in this series, I've done a portrait of Tom Hardy, Joaquin Phoenix, Josh Brolin, and then this will be Johnny Depp when it's done. So if anyone's interested in that, I also archive all of these if anyone wants to go back and watch them. And then if you ever have any technical questions or just want to talk, I'm basically just sitting here hanging out, drawing. So it's been nice talking with you about motorcycles and everything. Come back, subscribe or whatever. And like I said, I'll be live streaming every day for a while. Even if the time changes, I'm still going to try to live stream while I'm traveling. So it might be just a slightly different time, but I'll also, while I'm traveling, I'll be drawing smaller, so they'll be faster. So just as a quick aside here, so I love the way Mad Max Fury Road was filmed. Yeah, like that's a good example. It's actually kind of what I was talking about with like being creative with how they're using the cameras. I agree. I like that film a lot. So this is actually a smaller portrait of what I'm drawing large right now. So that's this one took me, I can't remember, I think it was about 20, 30 minutes. I do a morning sketch every day, like right when I get up. Usually while I'm having coffee, I'll draw these things. So this will be closer to the final product, but that's basically scaled up, so you can kind of see the size difference there. Cool. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for talking. Like I said, I'll be back on tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. All right. Okay. Have a good night.